Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. And in this video, I wanted to talk about how well Verizon is positioned for the next generation of wireless. So yesterday I made a video about AT&T, and a lot of analysts are predicting that AT&T is either not going to get enough C-band for mid-band spectrum, or they're going to totally overspend for C-band that they may want to get. And that's going to completely throw off the investors, and they're likely going to give negative feedback according to the stock. So in this article, the title states, record 5G spectrum auction pauses, which it did pause. It's set to resume January 4th as investors mull Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast bidding. So this is completely, some would say, out of hand. We knew the spectrum would be important, but nobody had an idea that it could possibly exceed $100 billion of total investment into this spectrum. So once they resume the bidding on January 4th, there'll be another 31 rounds left to go, which will probably take about another 2 weeks into January for it to complete. And then we'll know the final total that was spent on the auction. And then I would say likely early February, we'll know what spectrum holdings did the carriers win and where. So how did Verizon position themselves to be the best going into the next generation of wireless? So people are saying that Verizon is spending the total amount that they're spending on this spectrum to keep on par with T-Mobile. And if we're looking at the history, and people say history repeats itself, but if we are looking at the wireless history and how it has gone, Verizon is not looking to keep par with T-Mobile. They are looking to surpass T-Mobile. That's always their goal. They pride themselves in network. That is what they do. That is what they're good at. There is a reason they bought a very big chunk of millimeter wave spectrum, and it is clearly enterprise. They bought it for enterprise. Yes, the consumer may also use that spectrum in the areas where they're expanding it to, but they bought this to transform enterprise. You know, they just signed the recent partnership with Walgreens. I could see that happening with other big box retailers. I could see that happening with other bigger Fortune 500 companies. There's going to be a lot of that happening with Verizon. So they're going to make a lot of money off of enterprise. So they completely shifted away from government, and they kind of went to the enterprise side. If you look at the government side, they're not really much on innovating when it comes to that. So there's a lot of older buildings throughout the military that are very hard to get fiber to. You know, it's very hard to install millimeter wave at those bases and some of the DoD things. A lot of it is, outside of the city, so it's all satellite, microwave backhaul. So I can understand the strategy change from Verizon. They have services at those places, but it's kind of hard to innovate there because you can't really get the millimeter wave out there, and it's very hard to get fiber to the bases because they're so far away from the nearest fiber. So you have to pay that additional amount to roll that fiber out. Will there be exceptions? Sure, but that's not really. It doesn't really fall in with Verizon's strategy. So you can clearly see why they shifted from the government side to the enterprise. Enterprise is always willing to innovate. The buildings are more modern in some cases. There's fiber there. They can get indoor solutions in the buildings. So that's more favorable for millimeter wave. Now, how did Verizon position themselves to really take on the next generation and become the best at it? A lot of people always questioned, why didn't Verizon spend more on AWS-3? Why didn't they buy more low band? Why didn't they buy more mid band when it was available, band 30? And it was clear they were clearly in favor of densification at that time versus buying spectrum. Verizon always stated in most of their network videos that they know best when to buy and best when to build. So some of the engineers there, or some of the higher executives, they had a vision, and they said, look, the future of wireless is going to be higher band frequency, even a mid band, and it's going to require a very dense network. So do we spend money on spectrum, or do we take that money and we put it into the network to densify the network? And they clearly chose to densify the network. In some cases, it's 0.5, 0.6 of a mile. There's a tower every half a mile, at least in my area. I know a lot of the dense urban markets, it's getting there. In some cases, there's still like a New York City where T-Mobile is more dense, I'm hearing. But that's changing. Verizon is catching them there too. So the densification was a huge part during the LTE era, which is, still there. But as they transition over to 5G, they did choose to roll out the structure that fits best for higher band frequency. In some cases, it's mid-band. In some of the more really dense urban areas, it will be millimeter wave, even on the macros. So that's what I feel is their network is best suited for that higher C-band frequency, the 3.7, to really push that on the grid. That's a pretty much a half a mile apart. That will be a very strong capacity layer, and speeds are gonna be pretty good in those areas. So of course, we can't forecast what those speeds will look like, but there are several investments that Verizon is making to really achieve that next generation standard. It may take them a while. Like I said, I am very confident that T-Mobile does strike first. That is, that's going to happen. But once Verizon gets that C-band incorporated in the network, they add that additional CBRS layer. They get that Verizon One fiber out there. A lot of people don't discuss that, but that's between $100 to $300 million investment, depending on market. So they're getting that rolled out as well in the top 100 markets. I think at first it was the top 50. Then they started going to the top 60. I think eventually they will just roll it out in all of their top 100 markets. So they're adding that to the macros as well as the millimeter wave nodes as well to achieve the 2, 3, 4 gigabit per second speeds. So that's automatically going to scale up their network by a long shot, rolling out their own fiber, and long term will save them money versus going with a third party to boost fiber backhaul. And in some cases, like in some places like Cox, Spectrum, whoever's the ILAC in those markets, they can't even achieve 10 gig backhaul yet because their infrastructure is not ready for it. So Verizon in 2016, I believe this was under the old CEO, McDowell, I believe was his name. He chose to go with that strategy to put their own fiber. So that once that all comes together, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be very beautiful. Not to hold anything against the other carriers, but Verizon right now is working towards something completely different versus what T-Mobile is doing right now. T-Mobile is just right now upgrading their current infrastructure. And yes, it'll be faster, but T-Mobile has a lot more work ahead of them in terms of additional densification that Verizon may have already fixed. At some point, T-Mobile is going to have to do their own fiber. It's going to be way too expensive from an operational expense to boost to 5 to 10 gig backhaul. And then again, in some areas where they use Spectrum because they got a cheaper deal, Spectrum may not be able to provide that high of a backhaul. So that's going to be another story for T-Mobile. I think they will fix it over time, but it will take them far longer. And by that time, Verizon will already be mostly done with what they have. And we all know AT&T already has their own fiber on a much larger footprint than even Verizon. So AT&T can easily push 10, 20, 30, 40 gigs of backhaul onto their sites without any problems. They have the home internet, they got the fiber. So AT&T has been pushing that for far longer, but Verizon is catching up, and they're laying millions and millions of miles of fiber on a yearly basis to get to those levels. So that's why I think Verizon is really going to stand out from a next generational, from the 5G standpoint. Yes, it will take them a little bit of time, but once they get that CBRS, that C-band out there, more of the millimeter wave, I think they will start picking up, and the speeds are going to be tremendous on its network. I think they are very well positioned. They've remained a pure wireless player. They didn't really shift off. They didn't grow Fios to a much bigger platform than what it is now. They stuck to what they know and what they're good at. And I think that's why they will remain successful. And again, they've had the money that T-Mobile just got now, and they're still spending more, and they've been doing that since 2008 is when they really got started with the LTE, when all the other carriers weren't even doing LTE. Sprint was doing WiMAX, and the other two were doing HSPA. Verizon was already, again, much, much further ahead, in vision that LTE would be the way to go, and then everybody adjusted to LTE once Verizon was already 200 million pops in. So let me know what you think about that in the comment section down below. Just wanted to make this video. I just feel like Verizon is best positioned. I know right now they don't have necessarily the best spectrum, but the densification made up for it. So just think about the markets where they have really, really low spectrum, but they still exceed on a third-party basis testing. That's because of the densification. Now just think about them adding spectrum to that actual densification and see what it does. That's going to be very interesting to see come over the next few years. So again, if you are new to the channel or you have been on the channel and you have not yet liked, share, subscribe, make sure you do so. Hit the notification bell so you are notified when I do upload content. Make sure to follow the social media outlets for more updates. They will be in the description down below. More interaction on Twitter and Instagram as well. Thanks again for watching. This is Tyrone with Tech Life, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.